starting at verse 45. Now, from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, This man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, Truly this was the Son of God. There were also many women there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, After 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard.
That is Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 to 20. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, Greetings! And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. While they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, Tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. Now, 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age.
At 11:59 and 30 seconds on the 31st of December 1999, a beacon was lit. The beacon was set on the highest point in the parish. The field is actually known as Higher Beacon, but it's spelt Higher Beacon, and beacons have been lit there for centuries. The structure was the size of a small cottage. It had been months in the building. Tunnels, like horizontal passages in mines constructed with wooden pallets, were used from 4 directions, east, north, south, and west, to ensure airflow to the centre. And the centre of the beacon had been packed that afternoon with highly flammable materials. It went up like the inverted backblast of a lunar rocket. But the blaze, in all its glory, was witnessed by only 6 adults and 5 small children. Because at 11:30 on that evening, PM, fog had rolled in from the sea. Well, in 1999, at the turn of the millennium, Britain was full of hope. A recently elected government had come in on the theme tune, "Things can only get better." The economy was booming, the global village was humming, the humanist dream of science, technology, and the ingenuity of man, corporate enterprise, and international expertise knew no limit. And then came the fog. 9/11, 7/7, Afghanistan, the global financial crisis, austerity, the pandemic, Ukraine, Gaza. And my subject this Easter is hope. The Russian novelist and author Dostoevsky, totally without hope, one cannot live. To live without hope is to cease to live. The American poet and singer Dylan, we all sit here stranded, doing our best to deny it. So where does hope come from? Where does real hope come from? Not sentimental fluff, the kind of thing that is simply lost in the fog, but hope with substance, hope that holds, hope with foundation, real hope with confidence. I've chosen this theme deliberately, not simply on account of the national, international, and corporate canvas on which we all paint our little story, but because across our church family here in the city and throughout the nation, I see any number of instances where the bank balance of personal hope is significantly in the red. We've tried hedonism, the flingdom, since the turn of the century. We've tried materialism, the thingdom, since the turn of the century. We've tried individualism, selfdom, since the turn of the century. We've tried secularism, serfdom, since the turn of the century. Where is true hope on which we can build our lives? I want to deconstruct one sentence from the earliest Christian preaching to a non-Christian audience that you can find in the Bible. It's going to come up on the screen. It's there in your handout. It was spoken, this message, in Thessalonica, northern Greece, and it runs like this. You turned from idols to serve the living and true God and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. Jesus reigns, Jesus rules, Jesus rescues, Jesus will return. He reigns. That phrase, his Son from heaven, speaks of a living God who rules. The term son is far more than simply a description of family connection. The Son in the Bible is the title for God's eternal King, whom God installed as his ruler over every nation and all the peoples for all eternity. In the Old Testament, God declares of his Son, "You are my Son. I will make the nations your heritage." It's a title of royal ascent, royal accession to God's eternal throne, the living God who created the heavens and the earth. He has dominion from sea to sea, from shore to shore. All kings serve him. Nations bow down to the Son. We're reacquainted with the idea of the proclamation of accession. Remember St. James's Palace on the 8th of September 2022, repeated in Cardiff Castle, Hillsborough Castle, Mircat Croft, and British Overseas Territories. Well, the earliest Christian preaching was a proclamation of accession. The Son, enthroned in heaven for all eternity. Jesus, he reigns, a kingdom, kindness, goodness, gentleness, meekness, faithfulness, mercy, truth, integrity, love has been enthroned, the King of the universe. Well, how can we know that he's been enthroned? He reigns. He rose. There's a tendency when dealing with the resurrection to deal only with the evidential rather than the explanation of the resurrection. Have a look at our verse again. To wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead. Now, the fact of the resurrection of Jesus is an ineradicable truth, capital T, on the centerfold of human history. The facts are recorded in all four Gospels, in the letters of the early church, in the Acts of the Apostles. And across the piece, we find multiple witnesses on numerous occasions. They confirm that Jesus was the one who was crucified, that Jesus died, he was taken down from the cross, witnessed, prepared for burial, certified dead and buried. That the scriptures of the Old Testament insisted that God's king would rise, that the tomb was empty, that he was seen by Mary, by John, by Peter, by the 12, by over 500 at one time. And that the Jesus who was seen was physical. He ate. That the Jesus who was seen, who was physical, was the self-same Jesus who had been crucified. He showed them his hands and his side. That the disciples were persuaded that Jesus ascended, that the church was born. And all of that testimony, it's serious courtroom eyewitness material. The individuals drawn from every walk of life. John, the most scholarly. Paul, the corporate lawyer. Matthew, who worked in the treasury. An accountant, a tax collector. Peter, the independent businessman. James, the brother of Jesus. Luke, not himself an eyewitness, but a doctor who went around collecting eyewitness material. James and Jude, Jesus' own brothers. And all the women who saw him as well. You try persuading your own brother that you died, that you rose, and that you are king of the universe. I'll tell you what my brother would say about me. Actually, he says it already. Chuck Colson, one of those involved with Nixon's Watergate scandals, subsequently becoming a Christian, writes that those who were involved in the scandal on the evening made a pact that together they would agree a story and stick to it. By the following morning, they had, every one of them, changed their story. The disciples went to their death rather than deny that they had witnessed the risen Lord Jesus. But it's not so much the fact of the resurrection that the early accounts dwell on. It's the meaning. Throughout the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible, time, over centuries, God promises that his eternal king and ruler over all humanity for all time will rise from the grave. You will not let your Holy One see decay. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. He shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. He will crush the serpent's head. He reigns. He rose. Why did he have to die? Well, back to our verse. There's another really interesting detail in our key 22-word sentence. Did you see the place of the name? Just look at it again on your sheet there. It could read, to wait for his son Jesus from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, who delivers us from the wrath to come. It doesn't. It could read, to wait for his son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, who delivers us from the wrath to come, Jesus. It doesn't. That's because the very name Jesus, the Greek form of the Hebrew name Jeshua or Joshua, means God is salvation. God saves. So the placement of the name Jesus in that sentence is perfect. He reigns, he rose, he rescues. You turned from idols to serve the living and true God and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, God saves, who rescues us from the wrath to come. There is something in the death of Jesus Christ and on that cross, which is God's salvation for men and women in all of history. Why did he die? He died on that cross to carry God's judgment at our human rejection of God and rebellion against him. God's Son, his eternal King, who reigns from generation to generation and whose rule extends from shore to shore, died on that cross to carry the judgment that you and I deserve from God for the failures in our lives. Now, every one of us will have an understanding of the things that we've not said or done to others, of which we're profoundly ashamed. I mean, every one of us will have an awareness of things that we have said and done to others, of which we are profoundly ashamed. And every single one of us with any degree of self-awareness will have a consciousness of the things that we have not said and done for God, or have said and done against God, of which we are profoundly ashamed. And on the cross, the Son who rose bore in our place, through his sacrifice of himself, the judgment that we deserved. He reigns, he rose, he rescues. Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. You know, there's a famous Easter hymn, There is a Green Hill Far Away. It was written for children. There was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. He only could unlock the gate of heaven and let us in. Beautifully put. But you say, well, I don't need rescuing. I can look after myself. Thank you very much. He reigns, he rose. He rescues. He will return. So these addresses delivered by the Apostle Paul in 49 AD, which produced these churches to which he is now writing, they are the primitive preaching of the early church. And the early church insisted that this Jesus who reigns, who rose, who rescues, will return as Lord and Judge of all humanity. Listen to another sentence spoken by the Apostle Paul. God has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, and he's given evidence of this by raising Jesus from the dead. He will return, and he will return in judgment. Listen to this sentence spoken by the Apostle Peter. Jesus commanded us to preach to the people and to bear witness that he is the one appointed by God to be the judge of the living and the dead. I sometimes ask, is there anybody in the set, or rather not in the set, of the living and the dead? Oh, you may think your teenage daughter, when you're trying to wake her on a Saturday morning, is not in the set of The Living and the Dead. You may think your CEO is not in the set of The Living and the Dead. I don't know. But there is nobody not in that set. Every single one will be raised when Jesus returns, held accountable to the God and judge of the universe. You will be raised. I will be raised. I will be judged. You will be judged. He reigns. He rose. He rescues. He will return. We must draw to a close. Mary Harrington, she's a secularist writer, a feminist author. In a recent interview, she observed that progressivism, the progressives, is a concept that is profoundly Christian in its roots. It's a fascinating interview. It's the Christian faith that looks forward with genuine confidence. It's the Christian faith that has true substance in its looking forward. It is the Christian who can declare across the globe with a straight face and unassailable confidence that things will get better. There is a king who reigns in mercy, goodness, faithfulness, truth, and love. The king who reigns is the king who rose, and the king who rose is the king who rescues his death on the cross, and the king who rescues is the king who will return. And without that, there is no solid basis for our hope. Any concept that things can only get better, it's just sentimental platitude. The fog rolls in. Do humans really advance forever? Mary Harrington says, have you not studied any history? Are we really on an endless trajectory upwards? Mary Harrington says, just look back 50 years. And so the appeal of the authentic Christian message comes on the back of this. You turned from idols to serve the living and true God and to wait for his Son. Turn from hedonism, the flingdom, living for thrills. Turn from materialism, the thingdom, living for stuff. Turn from individualism, the selfdom, living for me. Turn from secularism, the serfdom, living without God. Turn to the living and true God. And if we won't turn, well, the Christian message, the fog will roll in. But more than that, judgment will surely come. That first Easter morning, 1,991 years ago, a beacon was lit. It went up like the inverted backblast of a lunar rocket. It blazes across the globe to this very day. And as people turn to the living God, to serve him, to wait for his Son from heaven, true hope, lasting hope, substantial hope, confident hope in the place of sentimental platitude. Well, may I wish you a really hope-filled Easter, and we hope to see you after Easter when we meet back here.